of chaos, and I'm here with Messy.
The messy gypsy. The messy gypsy Jessie. Try to say that 3 times fast.
Nice.
And I am here with the lovely Mad Max.
Me, Cammy.
Hi.
Cammy, who
he's
else
not
do we
doing
have
all
with
the
us?
time.
I've been called a lot of things, but lovely.
My lover.
Yeah,
And
we've got.
the beautiful and multi-talented mud lover.
There we go. There go. And absolutely, your mama goes to college, Mad Max. Your mom?
Right.
Your mom goes to college, Mad Max.
Your
I
mom
can
goes to
barely see it from here.
college.
What's
Do you have any idea?
no idea?
Oh my gosh. It's from Napoleon Dynamite.
Oh,
Gosh, your
No.
mom goes to college. You know what? Maybe I should go like quit eating the chips, Kip.
oh my God. I love that movie. Yeah.
Oh, that movie is so foolish.
I'm chatting with babes all day, Napoleon.
You know, I'm practicing to be a cage fighter, Napoleon. Go ahead and hit me.
I love that
I
short.
will just. Oh my God. That movie is just ridiculous. I could watch that any day. Oh my gosh.
I've been talking
Yeah.
about that
We
one a lot
actually-
lately because I'm in and out of the lava hot springs where the Liger Town was almost every day for the last few weeks doing different inspections I have to do. And every time we go by it, we think of Napoleon Dynamite in the Liger, in the
There you
Ligers.
go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think of the
We did-
Napoleon's drawing. To Tina or Trisha. Hey, Trisha.
Hey Trisha, are you drinking lofa because you think you're fat? Because you're not. We actually went down to Preston and found every house. We found the school. It was pretty cool. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. And it
Good
posted
times.
on the map, didn't it?
Yeah. It's all over. It's all over Preston.
Yeah.
So
A weekend where you can go on the tour bus and everything.
when
I have a
is
tour?
Napoleon Dynamite Day?
I don't know what it is for this year, but last year,
Right.
sometime in July, I think.
Was it last year because it was like the 20th anniversary or 30 something? 30th.
Something like that.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they had a big deal. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what's our topic, Jessie?
Oh, so we are going to talk about one of my favorite era time. We're going to talk about the Victorian era time. You guys, this is bananas on some of the stuff that they truly believed back then on things and like proper protocol in society and all that. I think I probably would have been an emo Victorian. You know? Yeah. Like, I don't think I would follow any rules.
Yeah. Yeah. I was reading about the beginning, like the Victorian era spans about 63 or 65 years or so. It's somewhere in there. And I think it was Queen Victoria's reign. That was the Victorian era.
Yes.
It was
Mhm.
Queen Victoria's reign over Great Britain. And at that, in that time frame, Great Britain expanded hugely. There was a lot of wealth coming into them, and they were able to kind of move that empire around. And during this time frame, there was a lot of advances in modernization, which now it's not modernization, but surely then it was, right? And
Mhm.
I think what that did was made people edgy, because before modernization of everything, people relied on religion strictly for thought processes and all, and then you have this huge technology boom for its time frame, and it opened up like a scientific thought process for its time. Say again.
It was you.
No, nobody said. That's weird. I heard something odd. Okay, so it opened up this this ability for people to kind of think outside the box. And I think that's
Mhm.
really what led to the spiritualist movement and looking into the paranormal and looking into the supernatural and, going to seek mediums and all of these people. It's because of this increased discussions of science versus faith.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting. I read a couple of papers that were written by graduate students on this topic, and they were really pretty fascinating because I hadn't really considered why the spiritualist movement happened. I just know it did. So that was pretty fascinating to me. But I know you guys have a whole lot of stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
So who wants
We
to go
talk about the
first?
revolution of Victorian times. We talk about steampunk, and that's what it reminds me of. I've been to a steampunk ball, which is really awesome, in Virginia City, Nevada. They had a huge ball down there. And I think every time I think about that, how the revolution and their scientific, like you were just talking about, and their spiritualism, how that kind of all comes together. So it's really neat. So
Pretty fascinating stuff.
yeah,
Absolutely. Cami, what was your topic? What were you going to talk about tonight?
Yeah, so I'm doing Victorian death rituals and their connection to vampire folklore.
So do we want to start with Cami or do we want to start with Mudlover and Mad Max? Jesse, what was your thoughts?
I don't care who wants to go. Why don't we just have Mad Max and Mudlover go first? Cammy
Okay.
can go, and then I'll go last.
Okay.
Okay, we'll end up with the death. I like that.
Yeah.
All right, Mudlover, what you got?
Whoa.
Okay. So our topic is Halloween, and I'm going to touch on a couple rituals from Halloween Eve, and then Mad Max will take off on some of the other Halloween shenanigans. So rumor
you
has
said
it, or
shenanigans.
tradition has it, that
Sorry.
on Halloween Eve at midnight, if a woman looked at a mirror, she would see the reflection of her future husband.
Hmm.
At
That's what
exact
happened.
midnight. Yeah.
I don't want to look at a mirror at midnight because that will no.
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 Nope.
Dusty, poopy old guy. See that.
Well, that's not what I imagined.
There's also, they also say that if a group of two or more single women boil an egg, remove the yolk and put salt in the place of the yolk, and then eat the egg and don't drink anything after it at exactly midnight again on Halloween Eve. When they go to sleep, they'll dream that they're thirsty, and their future husband will bring them a glass of water. Now, if they accept this glass of water, then sometime in her future, she will come across this gentleman and they
Oh.
will wed. But if you refuse the glass of water, you're most likely going to become a spinster.
Well,
Oh, heaven forbid.
wow. I guess, yeah. Wow. That's kind of fascinating. I've never heard these. Interesting. Okay. What else you got?
Yeah, the whole subject was interesting. You wanna take off or do a couple more?
Yeah.
Mad
A couple
Max?
more, Mudlover.
Well, those are the Halloween Eves. I can talk about Queen Victoria a little bit. She loved Halloween, and she would throw lavish wild parties, and people would carry torches and follow her carriage down the pathway to her wherever it was she lived. And at the end, when they got to the end, there would be a bonfire, and they would have a model of a witch that they would throw into the fire. But sometimes Queen Victoria would make the model of someone that she disliked. So could you imagine being at the party and the model was you?
I was just like,
Oh
so
my
that's
God.
what happened to me.
That's it, Jesse. That's it.
You know, it's
Oh
really
my God.
interesting because you look at the royal family and you wouldn't think that Halloween was like one of their favorite holidays. You would think like Christmas or something like that, you know, was one of their favorite, Coronation Day, or
Right.
I have no idea. Anyways.
Right. Yeah, like that little bit more elegance and regal to them, right? Not Halloween where we're all
Yeah.
dancing
It's
around
not
the
that elegant,
bonfire.
I guess.
Yeah. That's crazy.
You got to remember,
yeah.
you got to remember, Halloween for them, that was very spiritual, and especially in the Victorian time, they were starting to investigate. They were starting to check out a lot of new stuff, and that's what that Mud Lover is going to talk. Her last thing is she's going to talk about.
Yeah. Go ahead,
Oh,
Mud Lover.
So
I thought he was going to keep
continuing
going
with,
to Mud Lover. It's fine.
Victoria. I know. Not used to him stopping. Queen Victoria also, her festivities would be accompanied with bagpipes, and she would often receive backlash because of the large crowds, and sometimes the people with the torches would get out of hand. So much so that in 1874, she had to end the party because the crowd became too rowdy, and she was not going to let them inside the house. So she just said, "We're done."
Wow.
So,
You don't go,
yeah.
wow, Mama has
Yeah.
spoken. Wow.
Right?
It's a good thing they didn't burn down the whole village with those torches. That's crazy.
Totally. Yeah. All right,
Okay,
Mad
Mad
Max, you can take over. Your turn.
I'm going to get you guys signs. Your turn.
There you go.
So that was Halloween Eve. So Halloween again, they were they thought that was just the best thing in the entire world. They departed from previous practices of visiting grave sites of the dead by subduing the holiday to fit in with a society that was concerned with morals. So they were not allowed to have alcohol. They didn't do a lot of socialization in certain areas, and it became a time of very elaborate parties. Halloween parties seemed to be mostly for the middle and the upper class. Not a lot of poor folks got to go to those parties. By the 1890s, multiple publications were providing ideas for decorations. So I can imagine, I've seen some of those old Halloween costumes, and I mean gunny sacks, and God, they look friggin' terrifying.
Yeah, they were
Frightening.
I can't imagine.
Frightening. Oh
I
my
can't
God.
imagine some kid coming to my front door with a gunny sack over his head. You know, and I think there was a movie about that a couple years ago, a scary movie where there was, I can't remember. It'll come to me.
Wasn't
Probably
it Trick or
about
Treat?
midnight. It was Trick or Treat. Yes, it
Yeah.
was. That's a great movie. Look at you.
Yeah.
Look at you.
I love my movies. I love Halloween. It's fun.
Yeah, they really got into, depending on where you went to, they really got into games, and there were recipes built around Halloween, and pretty much Halloween night, when you were going to somebody of the upper crust, right?
Mm-hmm.
They really had parties that were incredible. They tried to dress their best parties, served with no matchmaking opportunities. Served as matchmaking opportunities. So kind of going back to what Mudlover was talking about, they one of the first things, and I just found this out, that bobbing for apples, that's what a woman would do to find her future husband. So whoever got the first one would be the next to marry. So that's kind of like catching the bouquet at a wedding, right? And the games would include using different items to find in your initials and your silhouettes and careers. It's pretty interesting the way that all of that was done. It was not only supposed to scare and invite seances and that kind of stuff, but some of the decorations, you think is kind of silly, was they would fill a bag full of a glove full of sand, and they would hand it around to everybody, and that was supposed to be a dead person's hand.
Oh my God.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, pretty interesting. They would they didn't at first, they did not use pumpkins as jack-o'-lanterns. They would go out and find other gourds to do that. And there was another thought of behind Halloween originally was they would put pumpkins or gourds out there, and that was supposed to scare away bad demons. It was supposed to scare them away. And if they were able to get past that, the candy or the sweets or whatever they were given was supposed to appease them.
Oh, wow.
That's kind of interesting too. I mean, that's a little off topic, but it's pretty interesting. Victorians were very superstitious. They did hold a lot of seances. They really bought into that stuff. They when they were living that, excuse me, they would live for those seances, and I mean those seances would be the talk of the town up to and during and after that party for at least a month. That's what those people got in. It was pretty interesting. So by 1910, the adults had lost some of the interest, and it kind of flickered out, and they didn't have a lot more matchmaking. They did not have a lot of matchmaking parties because that was what these parties were for. Again, like Mudlover was saying, there's certain things that you attracted your future husband, and it was the salt or whatever they did. But after about 1910, they kind of backed off on doing that. It officially by then turned into more of a kids' holiday.
Interesting.
Now, I've been to some Halloween parties where we acted like kids, but yeah, I think it's more of a children's activity. And at that point they kind of more, it was a social event. They focused a lot more on morals and proper behavior, and they were very elegant in their gatherings. It was very lighthearted games. They weren't going with the look for your husband or the seances. They kind of moved away from a lot of that. They dressed in their best clothes or costumes, right? So if you didn't have a costume, I mean, I guess you were dressing to impress. The party's awful. They still doubled as matchmaking events, but not as much. And excuse me, my voice is getting ready to go south. They were awful. They were viewed as very strict and reserved. They had some excitement, but they weren't what they used to be. They weren't the adults only when the shenanigans and tomfoolery really went off. These were more children's parties. So they moved into from the nice stuff to very scary children's costumes, bats, and like we talked about, gunny sacks over their heads, and witches and warlocks, because again, these kind of things are supposed to scare those bad demons off. So it's kind of interesting the way it's evolved into, and
definitely.
That's
Yeah,
so the Victorian era to me is costumes. Yeah, absolutely. But the Victorian era always seems so, they romanticize it so much. They really do. So it's kind of interesting that these, and I see these like Halloween parties being more of the high, almost elite social gatherings. It's for the wealthy. It was for
Exactly.
any reason for those people to get together and party, they would. I don't see the working
Yeah.
class probably being at a lot of that stuff for a very long time because, and in my mind, but maybe I'm not, you know, thinking of it
That's
right.
what
It
it
was
seemed
more
like.
of a, yeah, like an elitist kind of
Yeah.
movement for a while.
Mhm.
I mean, Halloween is older than the Victorian era, but it's interesting that they spun it their way
Mhm.
for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
You know, you when you have Queen Victoria, who that was her favorite thing. Of course, it's going to be extremely highbrow. It's going to be one of those things that it's like, well, we're going to a Halloween party. What are you doing? Oh, nothing.
Going to
You were the
bed
cream of the
'cause I
crop.
work tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah. I'll be in bed. I'll be in bed by 9.
I eat dinner at
But yeah,
5:30 and I'm bed by 6.
Exactly.
Right.
I like it. I like it. But yeah, that
Yummy.
was their thing, and it was very social. Their events were
Yeah,
very
very.
social.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Kim,
Didn't
you have
oh, sorry.
oh,
Me,
no,
you always
go
do
ahead,
this.
Jesse. We always do that. Go
Always
ahead.
do this. I believe didn't Queen Victoria do like when her husband George passed away? Wasn't she known to also try to do seances to contact George?
That was like I said, she was a big driver of that kind of stuff back then.
Was
That
it
was
scandalous for her to do that
yeah,
though?
and that was she had her seance room,
Mm-hmm.
and that was her area that she would, and she regularly had seances. So it's not a matter of, hey, let's get together and break the Ouija board out and have a seance, no, it was a regular thing for her to do.
Yeah.
And I again, it would have been interesting to watch some of that stuff. I think some of that stuff, it started at the stroke of midnight, which I found out is not necessarily the best time to do stuff like that. The best time to do stuff like that is at dawn, because that's actually when the day starts. That's when the veil, and they talk about 3 o'clock being the witching, or the witching hour, or midnight being the witching hour. 3 o'clock is when ghosts come out. But I was listening to a radio show today, and they said that dawn is actually when the day starts. So that's when you should be doing stuff like that. So
Interesting.
I'm already working by
Okay.
then, so it doesn't make a difference.
I know. I was going to say
Yeah.
I'm to work way before dawn, so it doesn't matter. Yeah. Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, Cammy, what do you have then? Let's hear it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so again, I was doing the Death Era rituals and some of their connection to vampire folklore. So as we already know, the Victorians were pretty obsessed with death. And from this, the first part that I have is the mourning etiquette. So after a death, I did find some discrepancies in information here. However, widows were expected to wear full mourning black clothes up to 2 years. I did read some sources that said that they were supposed to wear black for the rest of their lives. Not quite sure which one's actually the most accurate one. Their clothing was made from non-reflected fabrics like crepe, and men would have shorter mourning periods than the women were expected to, and they would wear armbands and black suits as well. Out of this era came death photography. So we got postmortem photography became super common. People would pose any of the deceased to look like they were living with their open eyes. And they had supported stands to make them look like they were either standing upright. And obviously, this is something that we still kind of do today with our embalmment processes.
I just a picture.
No.
Yeah. So I'm sure everyone's pretty common with a lot of those photos where you would
Yeah.
get, pictures of, dead children.
Oh, this is
Mm.
heartbreaking.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The backstory to this, the backstory to this photo, this actual photo, is the mom is dead and the little girl's alive.
What?
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
No.
No, I'm joking. I'm
Oh.
joking.
God.
Dude.
No,
It's
no
great.
way.
Colleen's like, what? They did her makeup awesome.
You and me. So families, they would have mementos, they'd keep hair, jewelry, shadow boxes, anything that they could to keep their loved ones' memories alive. And all of these, of course, served of it any sort of reminders that were possible. People, it was pretty common for them to die at home, so their body was prepared and laid out in the parlors, which what we would normally call a living room, to try to disassociate it from what their death is. They did cover up their mirrors with black cloth so that they could try to present the soul of the person who had passed away from getting trapped. And clocks were stopped at the time that somebody had passed away. Hair from the did end up being woven into intricate jewelry like brooches and rings and were kept as keepsakes. Some more interesting stuff about that. They had a bunch of superstitions as well. So carrying the deceased out of the home feet first. They wanted to do that in order to prevent them from looking back. The clocks and the mirrors, of course, the clocks were stopped and the mirrors were covered up to try to trap the spirits and to prevent any sort of premature burial. Families had a bunch of safety measures like bells that they would attach to the graves to make sure that the person was actually dead.
So what is that actually? What is that? What? Okay.
The dead ringer.
Yeah, exactly. So what? They were burying people. I believe people were being buried alive because they were what, in comas or something. I mean, what happened for the bell? Do you have the backstory on that? Because I don't remember it.
So I don't have a backstory on the bell, but I do know that the bells were put in place on the off chance that maybe the person wasn't dead and they were able to prevent them from being buried alive.
Yeah.
So then they would ring the bell from their coffin to try to alert somebody to come get them out. Whether or not burying people alive was common back then, I'm not sure of.
Well, it reminds me of New Orleans. Yeah. They were talking about New Orleans back in the same era or the same time. There was a huge sickness that went through New Orleans. And it was like, gosh, I could see it in my mind, but I can't. It's like a flu or a fever. Yeah. And there was a lot of people that were supposedly dead and they were not dead and they were buried alive. And so that's where the bells came in and they were tied clear to wherever they lived. And so if the bells rang, or if it was the undertaker would have would have these bells, and if any of them would ring, they would hear somebody was buried and they're trying to undig them. But 9 times
that makes sense to New Orleans, right? Because they're in tombs. They're not buried. They're above ground.
Right.
But crap. I just had water all over my computer
right now.
So you talk about that. That's where not only the dead ringer comes from, but that's where they get the graveyard shift from.
Yes.
Because before they would send the string to the mortuary or whatever, there was a guard out there, or a couple of guards out there, that would actually work the graveyard shift, and their job was to make sure to listen for those bells, the dead ringers, so those people could be dug up. A lot of that kind of goes back to we talked a little bit about them not being dead. Their embalming practices, they pretty much just put somebody in the ground, whether they were sick for a long time. Our medical staff was not completely 100% back then, so they called the doc in and he tried to listen. And in some instances, your pulse rate is really slow, your heartbeat might be really slow, and they would bury these people. They talked about digging these people up after a while and finding that their fingernails are broken because they tried to dig themselves out of their coffin.
Well,
Yeah.
at first, I wanted to say in New Orleans, they did bury them at one time in the ground until people started to realize, like, we've got like flooding, because at the time they didn't have levees for the Mississippi River. And so that's when they started doing above ground, because they're like, yeah, we got some bodies floating down the main street, Bourbon Street.
I was actually going to say, I just did a quick search. Mad Max makes a really good point. So a lot of it was a misdiagnosis of death, especially during that era, because medical knowledge was so limited and the signs of death just were not like what they are today. We just didn't have all of the knowledge that we do now. And they would really just determine anybody dead, even if they were.
Well, and that's when you have the body snatchers, or the people that would come and do grave robbings, because they were getting paid money to get these bodies, these freshly buried bodies, to people who were trying to learn to be a doctor, which there's a place in New Orleans. It's a pharmacy. And actually the mortician or doctor, was experimenting on live and dead people to learn about medical practices, and because he was sick in the head. But that's another story.
So then my next little section of it is Victorians and vampires. So obviously, we're all very aware with vampires. The Victorian era tend to evolve a bunch of folkloric kind of ghoul ideas. We touched base on a little bit of it during the Halloween customs. So in 1819, the idea of a charming upper class vampire was introduced, known as John Pilorty. And then after that came Bram Stoker's Dracula. And that's really what kind of cemented the idea of what we think of as a vampire as being like a blood-sucking, disease-ridden, scary figure of the night. And a lot of this comes from the medical paranoia, specifically tuberculosis. So victims would tend to waste away pretty slowly. They would cough up blood. And a lot of the time people would assume that they were a vampire because of all this blood that was just coming out of their mouth. And sometimes communities would then exhume bodies thinking that they were a vampire, and it's draining life away from the living during this period of time. They had vampire panics, especially in the New England area and in Eastern Europe back in the 1800s. So that led to corpses being sometimes buried with bricks in their mouths. They got stakes in their hearts, which is where we get this idea that the only way that you can kill a vampire is if you puncture it with a wooden stake into its heart. And then they would bury the bodies face down so that it would prevent them from, rising up with their little coffin. And that
Sorry, I'm just thinking of something, and I just
we get this. Then vampires tended to be symbolized with anything of the other. So any sort of deviant behavior or other races or weird gender roles that also got tied into this idea of it being like an unknown or dangerous entity such as a vampire. So out of the Victorian era, we did get a lot of death culture and vampire myths that kind of now have shaped what we have going on today.
Yeah. And did you know apparently there is another version of Bram Stoker's Dracula that nobody has ever seen?
Wow.
It's a whole different version.
Interesting.
And I was, yeah, crazy.
It's pretty interesting. I was reading a little bit on the vampire, the vampires and death and practices that were going on in New England, and when TB, which I think that's what they called consumption, right?
Hmm.
When TB was rampant and people were dying, they had some really weird beliefs, like if you drank the blood of the heart of somebody who died from TB, who just died, then you would then be immune, like you wouldn't catch it.
Right.
Or they would also sometimes burn the bodies or just the organs of someone who died to prevent this vampirism. They thought TB was related to vampirism somehow. I don't exactly understand that, but you would consume the ashes. So
Yeah.
that
Oh.
They
whole,
would make elixir.
yeah, exactly, is an elixir.
Mhm.
And that story about when they exhumed the Brown family, because
Oh, yeah.
they found blood, like blood in the heart of one of the girls. They died of TB, and you shouldn't, at that point when you exhume a body, there shouldn't be blood dripping out of the heart. It's it's congealed, it's decayed, it's becoming decayed. She was basically a skeleton, but there was a little bit of her organs left, and they said bloody, but I don't think they understood exactly the decaying process at that point. But yeah, Mr. Brown. So that was them exhuming the Browns, thinking that maybe there was some kind of vampirism going on with them.
Yeah.
And
I
go ahead.
thought that she was a little bit like she didn't decay as normal, I thought. And then she looked like they just barely buried her. Maybe I'm thinking of a different case, but
I think
yeah.
you're right. I can read this. Do you want me to read? This is what the
Sure.
Providence Journal posted. And it says, 4 men unearthed the remains of Mrs. Brown. Some of the muscles and flesh still existed in mummified state. There were no signs of blood and heart. The body of the first daughter, Mary Olive, was then taken out of the grave, but only a skeleton with a thick growth of hair remained. Finally, the body of Mercy, Lena, the second daughter, was removed from the tomb where it had been placed till spring. The body was in a fairly well-preserved state. The heart and the liver were removed, and cutting open the heart and clotted and in cutting open the heart, clotted and decomposed blood was found, which might have been expected at that stage of decomposition. The liver showed no blood, although it was in a well-preserved state. These 2 organs were removed, and a fire being kindled in the cemetery, they were reduced to ashes, and the attendants seemed satisfied. The old superstition of the natives of Exeter, and also believed in other farming communities, is that as long as the heart contains blood, so long will any of the immediate family who are suffering from consumption continue to grow worse. But if the heart is burned, and the patient will get better. And to make the cure certain, the ashes of the heart and the liver should be eaten by the person afflicted. So the father consumed the organs, and it didn't work. He died like 2 months later anyway.
No. Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. I don't think I would. Nope.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Very fascinating.
one of the things I'm actually going to be cremated, and my ashes are going to be made into a tea, and anybody that comes into this celebration of life, is going to be offered some of that tea, and just so I can always be with you.
There you go.
I think it's a great idea.
Eventually you'll go through the body, just saying.
No, I'm gonna get down to the molecular level.
Oh, is that right?
Yay.
Mud,
Otherwise,
mud lover said,
otherwise, you're going to be out in the Pacific Ocean, buddy.
Right?
or
Personally,
the
I'm
trash can.
into a talking stick.
A
There
what?
you go.
A talking stick. If anyone wants to talk, they have to hold my head on a stick.
Oh,
It'd be like, is
interesting.
that okay?
Mhm.
Okay.
All right.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I just want my body to be dragged up to Yellowstone and let the bears eat me because nobody needs to spend any money on cremating me, burying me, nothing. Just let the bears take me. You know, get back
If
to
Yellowstone's
nature.
here, you know,
Yeah. So,
we're having a
all
lot of
right.
earthquakes. Yeah.
What you got,
Anyway.
Jesse?
So Cam touched a little bit about the burial practices of the Victorian times. And it's interesting because I kind of dove a little deeper into it. And we just talked about the Brown family and how preserved some of the bodies can be in Victorian times. So they used arsenic to preserve the bodies back in those days, which is interesting. And anybody doesn't know what arsenic is, it's just a poison, pretty much. Some people actually used it as a medical medicine. Yeah, so I would never drink the tea.
Well, imagine the soil contamination around some of those cemeteries, and
Oh yeah, very much so.
because that stuff is going to stay there.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So they don't use. I mean, obviously they don't use arsenic now. They use formaldehyde, and other various
Which isn't any better.
Correct. But
Yeah.
I think I'll just do what everybody else. Just throw me in the furnace. I'll be good. So throw me
After
over
you
there.
get
That's
done
fine.
listening to our funeral home series, you won't want that either.
Oh, well, I mean, you could just throw me over the fence.
No.
It'll be fine.
In the fire ring, Jesse. We'll have a bonfire.
Yeah. Good luck. I think it's got to be like 2,000 degrees or something. So, yeah. So back in the day, we know that life expectancy for the Victorian times was pretty low. And death was a commonplace occurrence in that age. Interesting enough, 3 of every 20 babies died before their first birthday. So that's pretty sad. And a lot of it is because, again, we talk about medical, and they were just starting to learn more about human and the bodies and the effects of all diseases and everything, right? And those who survived infancy had a life expectancy of only 42 years old, which is crazy.
Well, I don't think sterilization of anything existed then either. Like
No.
disinfectants, sterilization, any of that stuff. So, ugh.
Yeah. And it was so like it was said, death would take place most often in the home. And when the death occurs, the entire house stops, like Cami was saying. Bodies would be stored in the homes until they were buried. And there was a lot of rules and regulations of what was proper and what was decided on every aspect of that, person's life. It was considered quite a scandal if any of the rituals were broken. And so I mean, if you're in high society and you didn't follow every ritual like it was supposed to, you were not popular anymore. So the progression to the burial site was a spectacle. We talk about how people would carry the body, and it was important of how many people would show up to your funeral and how popular you were. If there was not a lot of people showing up, apparently you did not live a very good, proper life. So that was some of the
still the truth today in society. People think that way, right?
Right, and it is. true. Like it depends on how popular you are, and
Exactly.
of course how much money you're spending on your loved one.
Or
and
how
as
many
we know it
heirs.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Um,
don't know, because you'll read something and like 1,200 people turned out for their funeral. It was a big spectacle. It was this and that. And that seems to be still very much the sign
Yeah.
of how popular you were, or how many people's lives you affected, or maybe how much money they think they're going to get from you.
Oh yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
and that's when, you know, people from your past come through and say, "Oh, they were the most special person in my entire life." And okay, it's unfortunate, but it's true. And
Yeah.
we talked a little bit about the photography. You know, which myself being a photographer for my hobby, I don't know if I could do a family post-mortem picture. I think it'd be a little,
Right?
I don't know. I think it'd be a little creepy. Like even today, there are people who will take pictures of their deceased loved ones, and I still, in my mind, like it's okay. Guess whatever is okay. Like personally, I've seen loved ones that I've had pass, but I also feel like it's disrespectful in a way.
I do
And
too.
I don't know why, but it's like, you know, that's their, I don't want to remember them that way. And
I don't want it. Yeah, I
No.
can't imagine taking pictures of my parents in their death state.
yeah,
That would
yeah,
just torture
No.
me forever.
yeah.
So no.
And
Right?
yeah, I couldn't do that. But back then this was important because this was the only time really that they could get the family members together. And it only cost them $1 back then to develop the photographs. So that was interesting to, you know, and of course common folk couldn't afford that just because they don't have that
Sure.
money. But if you're well in society, you do.
Right.
But I'm going to go over just like a few of the Victorian era rules. So during a wake, we know that it is necessary to cover the mirrors, and we know about that with black cloths, not anything, just black cloths. And this was to prevent the soul of the deceased person from becoming trapped inside the mirror. So that was the reason of that.
Oh.
Flowers would bloom on the grave of someone who had a good and prosperous life. So there again, we talk about if you were good in society and you had a prosperous life, you would have flowers grow on your grave. Rain during a funeral procession, meant that deceased would go into these pearly gates in the sky. So rain was a good thing on your funeral. Hence why when there's funeral movies or something like that, it rains all the time, right?
Yeah. I guess, yeah. So rain is supposed to be good luck on your wedding day and your death day, huh? Or
I
your
guess
funeral
so.
day.
Yeah.
Interesting.
A mirror falling off the wall and breaking meant someone was about to die.
Yeah.
It was bad luck to run into a funeral, progression, which we even today, when a funeral is like on a street, we stop because it's rude to go in front of anything. Just FYI, people who are driving, it's rude. Respect, right?
Yeah.
If you saw
Definitely.
a funeral coming, it was wise to turn around and go in the opposite direction. The only way to be able to confront a funeral, possession. I want to say possession.
Yes.
Was to hold on to a button the entire way until you arrived at your destination. So hold on to that button. Apparently, a button was supposed to kind of, make you arrive to your destination safe.
Interesting.
So, yeah. A clap of thunder after a burial meant the deceased soul had arrived at those pearly gates in the sky, which kind of like in my personal life is interesting because after my father passed away, there was a thunderstorm. So when I read that, I was
Wow.
like, oh, yeah. So,
Wow.
Wow.
don't wear anything new to a funeral. Just don't. So just wear that old black dress that you wore a year ago. That's fine. Don't wear anything, or if you smell roses, think again. Smelling roses meant someone was about to die. So there's that other superstition that they had was there were certain smells or certain things that would happen, and oh no, that person's going to die. For instance,
Wow.
if somebody died in the house and they had the funeral in the house or the wake, they were supposed to take the pictures if they had any pictures of loved ones and turn them face down, because they believed that if the spirit or the bad luck or something, those people would be next to die. So it was interesting on the superstitions that they had.
Yeah.
And then a bird crashing or pecking on the window meant death as well.
Oh.
And spilling salt.
Mhm.
So, it's like Dumb and Dumber scene. That's all I can see. Harry, you spilled
Oh,
the
wait
salt.
a minute. Spilling salt meant somebody was going to die? I thought it was just bad luck.
That's what spilling salt could mean death. Take a pinch and throw it over your shoulder as a preventive. Now, doesn't really specify what. I think it's your right shoulder. I think you take it and throw it over your right shoulder, right? Or, oh God, well, guess I'm going somewhere. And Victorians believed in opening an umbrella indoors meant someone in the family is about to die. Hence, we talk about it's bad luck opening an umbrella inside. So a lot of the superstitions
preoccupied with death. I guess it's because of all of the
Wow.
TB and everything that was going around. But it seemed like everything that they thought about was centered around death.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
And I have a couple more that are kind of interesting. Dog howling when somebody was lying in bed ill meant death was certain. But turning over a shoe under the bed would prevent said death. So I don't know if taking a shoe and turning it upside down. I don't know. Yeah. If a bad luck to your so it was bad luck to lock your doors after a funeral. If anyone else is feeling this one, this is just a open welcome to thieves, right? We don't want to lock our doors. Might as well just, I don't know, come in and rob me. But apparently you were not supposed to lock your doors after a funeral. But it's because the belief of they wanted their loved one to come back, hence the spiritualism that they talk about and the seances. So it's kind of like this bad luck to do it this way. And, you hear thunder and they're at the pearly gates, but we don't want to lock a door because they might come back when we do a seance. But I feel like they were very interesting people, and there's a lot of superstition that still carries on today, like I mentioned. And I think it's just pretty cool that we still practice some of these superstitions as well as burial practices. If you really think about it, I mean, that's how we came into having viewings. If you really think about it, that's a wake. It's just more makeup and more time because of the chemicals they use now. Back in those days, it was arsenic and so.
Yeah, that's nuts. I didn't know they used arsenic. And the person administering the arsenic, I'm sure, had a very long and healthy life. Ha ha. I can't imagine. I can't imagine that. So the whole Victorian era, I mean, it really does take on a dark, morbid turn when you start researching it, because they romanticize it in the movies, right?
Yeah.
And it's really not. I mean, there's parts of it, but it's really not. And it was grimy, like the cities were filthy. There was no sanitation. There was no, people they piled up their trash outside. There would be heaping piles of trash and human waste and everything else out on the brick streets, and ooh, it was just nasty.
Yeah. Well,
So give
and
me
you
the
got to think
country.
and you got to think the ladies too. Like the men did wear like suits and stuff, but the women wore a lot more layers of clothes because it was proper to do so in society. And so they wore like their what is that? Their pantaloons. I want to call them pantaloons.
Pantaloons, yeah.
And then, like their corset, which is like super tight, and then another layer of clothes, and then another layer of the clothes, and then you got this big black dress, and
yeah,
So
and they're supposed to wear that. Yeah. So it's like, I can just imagine how sweaty and stinky you feel after that. I don't think I could do that.
Yeah.
their hygiene practices.
I don't think there was any, hence why they had June weddings, because of the flowers. Because that's where the flowers were full, I don't think there was a lot of baths being taken because of diseases. And
but if they took more baths, they may not have had so many diseases. If they use clean water, I mean,
true.
Yeah.
But
anyway,
you got to remember back when they were doing baths like that. They'd do them maybe once every couple of months, and it would be the most important person in the family would get the clean water, and then it would cycle all the way through till the last person, kind of going back to what Jesse said about babies, the last person that would be taking a bath would be the baby. So that's where we get the term, don't throw the baby out with the bath water, because they were the last one to take a bath, and they were the ones that got the sickest and the dirtiest,
Yeah.
Pretty interesting.
It's really weird that you brought that up, because I was reading something about how the mothers would, because the bathwater was so dirty, like they sometimes would I don't know if it's I hope it was, but I mean sometimes the babies would slip in there and they couldn't find them because the water was so black. I don't know.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
Oh my gosh.
Like yeah.
The whole process of burying people probably alive because they were misdiagnosed and having to put bells on their graves, and hopefully, my God, that they would wake up before they ran out of oxygen and ring the bell, right? And then just the whole death practices in general was just I don't know, we've kind of boomeranged the other way. Like now a lot of people don't even want to acknowledge death. They don't want to go to a funeral. They don't want to go to a memorial service. You know what I mean? We've kind of, we've pushed 180 degrees the opposite direction now. We don't even want to deal with death. And
we don't want to talk about it.
You don't even want to talk about it. Yeah, they had a body laying on their living room table in the parlor for 2 weeks while everybody came to see him, and then buried him. And now it's like, just get him out of view, out of sight. Let's not talk about it. Let's move on as fast as we can. So it's kind of interesting how far we've come. Maybe not, I don't know, which is better. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
There was a lot of flowers.
What's funny is when they would find a body that was, I mean, we're so far off track, and I apologize for that, but
no, it's fine.
When they would find a body that nobody knew, a dead person, that's why mortuaries used to have big windows, and they would display that body. And so, and there would be a day off from school, and they'd have all the kids walk by. If it's a kid, they're thinking, oh, this third grader might know who it is. So they would put these bodies on display so people could come by. And it's kind of morbid, but, back then you didn't know a lot of people. So, and especially if you're in a tight-knit community, somebody's got to know somebody. So pretty interesting stuff. I'm glad that we've evolved away from that.
Because could you
just because
You just don't want to walk down
know?
Main Street with
Well-
your ice cream cone and look at a dead
Right.
body in the window? Is that a problem for
Right.
you?
Well, and cemeteries, they in Victorian times they used to go there and have picnics in cemeteries.
Yeah, they did. They
Mhm.
certainly did. It was a place to communicate with the dead and
Yes.
be close to your family. Yeah.
Hmm.
And have those
Mhm.
conversations. And now people don't, there's not, I mean, people do go, but not often.
Right.
It's not, you don't see
Yeah.
that happening.
No.
I think today,
Well,
if you saw somebody
traditionally,
having
yeah.
a picnic, it would freak you out.
Well, traditionally they would do that on the death date and the birthday
Yes.
of the people that passed away.
Yeah.
There's Dias las Muertes, the Day of the
I
Dead.
was just thinking that.
They celebrate that. There's actually places that will actually dig that body up and put on clean clothes
Isn't it's in the
and
Oh.
Philippines?
do their hair and stuff like that. And I was just like, yeah,
No.
no. Again,
So
again,
community.
I'm gonna be burned,
Yeah.
burned. I don't want that.
Yeah, no, I don't want anybody's,
Nope.
no. Anyway, this was an interesting topic. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. I didn't know a lot of the stuff about
Heck
Queen
yeah.
Victoria. I didn't know a lot of the stuff about the death practices. So fascinating stuff. I can't wait till next week. I don't know what we're doing, but it'll be cool. But yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. We do appreciate your time, and we enjoy doing this. We do this because we love it. So yeah, we will catch you guys next week. And until then, everybody stay safe. Make sure to tune in. We have a lot of content out there. Like and subscribe. We have the Thin Line that Jesse and I and David do. We do the Paranormal Live show on Wednesday nights with our mediums, do live readings. We do all kinds of stuff. Mad Max and Mudlover and I, we do off-topic historical cool stuff. So we have a lot of content and a lot of shorts and a lot of fun. So everybody stay safe out there, and we'll catch you next week.
Bye.
Awesome.
Bye.
See you guys. Have a great week.
And it's not ending.